I don't want to like put my money in anything else. And I want to put my money in the best investment ever. That said, the best investment ever has this one little asterisk of could there be a potential compromise, a Q day?
Welcome back to the Compass Mining Podcast. My name is Jarrett, and today I'm joined by Hunter Beast to talk about something that is gaining increasing attention as the Bitcoin network grows and as the nascent technology, I want to say it's nascent, but maybe we can dive into how nascent it is, quantum computing. And today we're going to talk about quantum proofing the Bitcoin network. So Hunter Beast, thanks so much for hopping on.
Yeah, happy to be on.
Before we started to record, you were saying that you're in the middle of a move. You want to shed some more light on that?
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, actually, apologies for the demonic imagery in the background. That is not mine. This is my buddy's basement. He's a pretty cool guy. He's actually an anarchist. But anyway, I'm kind of moving down here for a bit because I'm selling my house, and that way I can stack a few more sats.
Do you know Curtis Harris?
I don't.
Curtis Harris is the director of growth at Compass, and he is actually the meetups that happen monthly. We're recording on the 14th, and last night was our March meetup.
I was there. Oh, I know Curtis. Yeah, I didn't know his last name, but yeah, he's a cool guy.
Yeah, so Curtis actually just did the same thing. And I've known that for a while, but I've been coy about sharing it because it's his personal life and his personal investments and stuff. But he just put up a video on LinkedIn and I think on X where he very much talked about his plan with his family. And he's like, I'll take his basic premise, and it's probably similar to yours, is like, let me take out the equity. Let's say you have 30% equity in the house. It doesn't really matter, the number.
Yeah.
And then he's like, if I just wait 5 years, I'll be able to then go buy the whole house. Right.
Exactly.
So are you on the same thinking?
I'm thinking more like maybe 10, but sure. Yeah, I'm essentially of the same mind. Yeah.
Yeah, you're not the only one. I have many friends back in 2020 when the pandemic hit and they saw housing go through the roof. They sold, and it's really hard to sell at the top of anything because you just have that like, oh, this is never going to go down. Like, why would I ever sell my real estate? And I have a buddy, and he sold a couple doors of his rental properties, and he bought, I don't know, 20 Bitcoin when it was at like 10,000. To this day, a really good move, right? So you're definitely not alone in that. And I love to hear that. Are you? I assume that you'll be staying in the Denver area.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. So yeah, Curtis Harris, next time you see him, you can mention that you are in the same conviction level of selling real estate to buy Bitcoin. Let's go.
Cool. They had a really good event last night, by the way. It was really cool. Had some really great guest speakers. Trying to remember, I think I might be able to remember the name of one of them. I can't. But anyway, it was a neat presentation because it just went over the logistics of Bitcoin mining and how like just difficult that is. And like it's easy to kind of forget, as like as a Bitcoiner, just to like not really get a sense for how much industry goes into actually powering this stuff. But it is a lot of work. It is hard work. It's very technical. And you have to really know what you're doing to be successful in it. And otherwise you'll like, you run the hazard of like delivering your shipment to a scammer of ASICs, right? Like if you're not checking every little thing, or the shipment will arrive, but it's like not the same stuff, like you have to, it's interesting. Like this is stuff that you never really thought of, but you have to like consider. It's really interesting. And, I'm a dev, so, like I'm more of the side of things where I'm like, I tell you what to mine. But regardless, and I've driven a good amount of fees to these people, so that's you should, yeah. I was actually I was involved in the ordinal stuff. Uh, that was actually really cool. There, I hope they have a resurgence again because it is a really neat project and they put a ton of work into it. I saw some of the work that went into it beforehand. I was an early contributor to the project actually because I'm a Rust developer, and so I uh, I spend my days writing Rust for the most part, and but now I'm starting to write it, not starting to, but I've been spending a lot of time writing a BIP as well, writing and responding to feedback and thinking different things through. It's actually, it takes up a lot of time, uh, but it's rewarding and worth it. I think there's really there was nobody else working on this kind of thing before I started, and the few that have since kind of popped up haven't made BIPs. And so like I'm basically like the only serious like like how would you say person trying to solve this problem. Like there are definitely other people out there putting work towards this, and I appreciate their work and I see it and I respect it, but until you actually go out of your way to write a BIP, like you're not really uh necessarily you're just experimenting, really. You're just putting stuff out there, and that's cool, but if you really want to be serious you have to write a bit.
What does, and you just said a lot of things that I want to unpack. First of all, I loved your comment that you're basically subsidizing miners because of all the work that you've done in Bitcoin. And you should always, whenever you see miners, you should tell them that, because I think they'll get a chuckle out of that. What does it look like to write a BIP? Because what I'm getting from that, if I can make an analogy, and you're going to have to excuse my analogies, the only way I can get through some of this, like to visualize this, is like, it's like, cool, you're writing a bunch of blogs, but I'm an actual author of a book. Right. It's like, yes, we're writers, but I'm doing something a little bit more in depth and really putting it out there. Is that an accurate analogy? And then what is the process to write and then submit a BIP?
Well, what it kind of is, but like a BIP is also a living document. Like it can be updated. You're held accountable to it. It's really instructions for something that could be, you know, very important to Bitcoin consensus. And and there's also different kind of BIP offers. BIPs. There's consensus BIPs and there's application BIPs. Application BIPs are more for like wallets and that sort of thing, like BIP 32, BIP 39, BIP 38. But then there's like actual like like in the weeds, like consensus level BIPs. There's a lot in the 300s, and there's also and the 100s for like SegWit, and then there's of course like BIP 8 and BIP 9 for activation. So yeah, it really is like comparing it to like writing a book is not quite right, because it really is like uh just like way more of a commitment than just like you write the book and then you're done. And it's in some ways maybe it's like more like being like a book series author, like like the guy who wrote Wheel of Time, like Robert Jordan, is that it? Yeah, anyway, stuff like that, like you're just like trying to like but then it's just one thing you're working on. And some people work on multiple BIPs, rarely, but they do. Like Paul Stewart comes to mind. But and I think maybe Jeremy Rubin, could be wrong. So definitely Peter Woolley, right? Like Peter Woolley is like legend. Even though he and I disagree on a few things in the quantum front, but regardless, it's good. Yeah, like just writing a BIP is a big responsibility, I think is a good way to summarize that.
Yeah, the fact that it's a living document definitely takes it away from it being a book, like you said, because it's not like a one and done. The proof of work is submitted, and then I don't have to update it or think about it or be challenged or be critiqued, or new tech comes out that changes the way we thought about stuff. So I think that
Exactly.
that's a really good way of putting it. What I want to do today is kind of walk through what is the challenge that quantum is bringing to the Bitcoin network. Then I want to talk about the solution, which is BIP 360 or BIP 360, which is your brainchild, is your baby. And then I want to look at the challenges to implement that. So to start there, what currently is the problem or threat? And I love that this is happening right now. What currently is the problem? If you're not watching, if you're listening to this on a podcast, a cat has just joined the podcast. This is the first time that this has happened on the Compass Mining podcast since I've been here. I love it. What is the current threat of quantum that you are seeing and is pushing you to dedicate time? Because as I understand it, you started to look up the BIPs and you just didn't see anything. So you're like, well, like many things, like many people have also come on this podcast, Tyler Stevens, who's at the space, who I'm sure you know, he looked around and he didn't see a book about Bitcoin mining reuse and heat reuse. And he was like, all right, I guess I just have to write one. So I feel like it was a similar thing for you where you didn't see it and you're like, I guess I just have to do it. And then what is it like, can you break down the threat that is on the horizon for us of quantum to the Bitcoin network?
Compass Mining makes Bitcoin mining accessible to everyone. Whether you're investing in one machine or thousands, our customizable solutions are tailored to meet your needs. We are your experts in Bitcoin mining, offering a platform where individuals and businesses can purchase hardware, host machines, and access a range of ancillary services. Start mining in as little as 48 hours with our turnkey hardware online and mining directly to your Bitcoin wallet within 2 business days. Discover more at compassmining.io and see how we can power your success.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. Tyler Stevens' work on the Heat Pump Manifesto actually is kind of in a similar vein, like in similar, like parallel, and so that's a good like comparison. And it really is just like an indication of just how early we are, and also in some ways it's signs of that we're maturing because we're thinking about more angles of this problem. And so like the industry is maturing, the technology is maturing, there's like multiple dimensions we're realizing are like it impacts. And that's one reason I dedicated my career to Bitcoin, is because it is the most complicated thing I could think of working on. It touches so many so many details. It's like it's this fantastic merger of technology and like reality that like proof of work is an amazing thing because it ties together software into something that is finite and scarce in reality. And so I don't know, I just think it's a wonderful thing. But no, the Tyler's work on, yeah. And so actually I'm trying to remember the rest of your question.
No, my question is, if you could just frame what the threat is that made you say,
All right.
I need to create BIP 360 because it doesn't exist and I've looked it up.
Yeah. So but the I would say like the major thing that that's kind of caught my attention is the fact that there are a couple things. One is the industry is pouring billions of dollars into multiple companies here in the United States. We're not seeing it much outside the United States. Like Europe is notoriously not working on much of anything other than maybe regulation. Like the greatest innovation is regulation, right? But I try not to make you laugh while you're sipping.
No, that was good. It was lovely.
But,
I've never spit out water on a podcast, but I almost did. I just love taking pot shots, I guess, in Europe.
Yeah. I mean, that said, like Brains is a bright spot in that. Like
Sure.
They're working on an actual ASIC chip, and I mean maybe we have blocks work here, but like very few people are doing that. So much kudos to them. Also, China has like some programs, but like they're also notorious for putting out kind of like strange papers that don't necessarily make sense. And also their achievements that they put out there in quantum computing seem kind of overblown and sensational, whereas like a lot of what the Americans are doing are like just fun foundational science essentially for the technology they're building. And yeah, like there's a number of companies too, like well financed big tech companies, Microsoft, Amazon, Intel, IBM, and Google. And then there's also like startups like PsiQuantum, Rigetti, IonQ, and also there are defense contractors that are working on this a suspiciously long time, like 20 plus years. And like the Honeywell and Raytheon come to mind. And so that's kind of the quantum computing landscape in the United States. We're pouring billions into this technology. And also, on the other side of it, the government seems relatively concerned. Like, they are saying we do not want new technology in the government using elliptic curve cryptography or RSA by the year 2030. And everything needs to be sunsetted that uses that technology by 2035. So we have like 5 to 10 years where like there has to be a big transition away from elliptic curve cryptography. And like that is the underpinning for Bitcoin security. Aside from SHA-2, proof of work, for signatures, like whenever you sign a transaction for funds you've received at an address, that's where elliptic curve cryptography comes in. And that's if that's broken, then Bitcoin security essentially is whatever it eventually defaults to however we secure the financial system to begin with, which is through threat of force, right? And investigators and law enforcement essentially, because like that's the most we got at that point.
So along with the question that what is the threat, right? And you're saying the threat is there's billions of dollars going into R&D in both the private and the public sector to push quantum computing forward to a point where maybe it would be able to disrupt the Bitcoin network. The most logical next question, and probably the most important question, is what is the timeline? Because I think that is, I think humans are inherently bad with urgency. And I know this because if you went to high school or if you went to college, you had a paper. And your teacher said, hey, you know what? The paper's due at the end of the semester, and which was in December. And they told you this in September. And many people listening to this didn't start it till Thanksgiving, maybe. So my point there is like, how far away is this horizon? And then how much of human nature is going to play into account? Because the story in my head is like, let's say, BIP or BIP 360 is perfect. I want to get into this more, but it's just like in my theory, it's like, even if it's perfect, doesn't mean it's like, humans are so flawed in that we could understand something is bad for our health, but we'll still do it. We can understand something's good for our health, but we won't do it. So thinking about the network, thinking about consensus, thinking about the nodes, the miners, the devs, getting everyone in the same room. How far away is this? And then, I guess we can start to dive into maybe some of the challenges there from the human, just like the human nature side.
Yeah, well, I think like one of the hardest things to wrap your mind around in quantum computers is just that like they're so kind of foreign and unfamiliar and experimental technology that it's like the way just how they work is just bizarre. I actually have difficulty explaining it, and I've been looking into this subject for about a year now, and maybe it's only about a year, but like still it's it's tricky stuff that we kind of don't have words for. And quantum computers also kind of are giving us a window into really strange stuff, like how the universe works. And it's really interesting, but like having a sense of this like strange, almost alien technology, and how it's progressing and where it's going and what threat it could pose is difficult. Now, there are startups that are saying, they might have some major progress within only a couple of years. Um, that's kind of concerning, but it might just be optimistic. Uh, I know that PsiQuantum recently taped out like an actual uh, chip design. They didn't say how many qubits it was, but they're actually like, they're sending silicon off to designs to a silicon wafer fab, right? And so, it's getting real when they start doing that. And so, yeah, it really is hard to say. It could be 2 years, it could be 5 years, it could be 10 years, it could be 20 years, it could be never. Like, this is like such a complicated and strange technology that we just don't have much familiarity with yet. Like maybe in 20 years, we'll look back at this podcast and we'll be like, oh, well, quantum computers are this and that, like we'll have the language for it. We'll have some, like, there'll be a everyday part of our daily lives, maybe, and of course, like certain things would be obvious, but it really at this point in time, like, let's just put like the marker in the sand and being like, no, like we have no fucking idea, what where we are or how good this could be. And that kind of uncertainty is just like difficult to grapple with because it does pose such an existential threat to Bitcoin. And I'm like, I'm a little worried about that. And that said, like, it's not like I want to put my money in gold because like, like gold, like for example, oh yeah, sure, it's quantum resistant, but there's other problems with gold, right? There's paper gold, it's hard to verify, it's hard to transport. You're not gonna like want to keep a bunch of it in your basement somewhere, and and additionally, like if we're talking about existential threats, Elon Musk is coming up with rockets that are like they maybe cost maybe $100 per metric ton to no, is it no, $100 per kilogram. That's different. $100 per kilogram to get maybe even $10. That's it could be somewhere between $10 and $100 per kilogram of just getting payload up in orbit. They could, like that's a hell of an arbitrage between the price of gold per kilogram. And so, whatever they got to put up there to get a kilogram of gold back, that could also be a concern. So, yeah, I mean, that there are a lot of reasons that I don't want to like put my money in anything else, and I want to put my money in like the best investment ever. And that said, like the best investment ever has this like one little asterisk of like, could there be, a potential compromise, a Q day, like something really bad happening with essentially increasing the amount of liquidity in circulation, but also like if we're super unprepared for it, it could irreparably damage the network in ways that we can't imagine.
Yeah, and I've heard you talk a little bit. You were talking at the space with Tatum. You were just featured on What Bitcoin Did. Congratulations. That's a massive podcast within the Bitcoin space. And you talked about Q Day. And I think I want to get into then what this looks like. So what does Q Day look like? Because this is where I start to think about some of the philosophical things around what this would look like. But yeah, can you break down what Q Day would look like and then also talk about, well, let's talk about that because then getting into where the attacks are and where they could be is completely different. So yeah, what would Q Day look like?
So it's not going to be immediately obvious probably that like quantum computers would compromise the network because you kind of just can't tell. And what we might see are like the big honeypots, like the Binance Cold Wallet and the Kraken Cold Wallet. Those are like some of the highest value addresses in the network. And if they're saying, well, first of all, they probably won't actually tell us like in advance, if they've lost everything. And it's yeah, I'm just like they might try to hide it, but we know what those addresses are, and so we can just look. If those go to zero, then that's one potential consideration. And another thing that might go like, there's some game theory to this. There's like, kind of like an imitation game style like strategy to, like, if you have a quantum computer. First of all, it depends who has a quantum computer. Is it just the United States government? And they're probably using it like against other nation states, not necessarily Bitcoin. If it's a big company, they might have like legal qualms with this, even though there might be a legal case for recovering lost coins, because coins considered lost, because there's like unclaimed property laws, right? And so maybe either like a big company decides to go that route, or they're like, no, we don't want to touch this with a 10-foot pole. And like, that's one thing. Then there's also the startups like Cyclonum, Rigetti, and IonQ, and those are like kind of like those are like I would say the wild cards, because that would be like a major win for them, like a major claim to fame. And then also, once they do it, they're going to get a bunch of offers from people who want to do it too. And so they'll probably sell a ton of those machines, make a ton of money off of selling pickaxes to the gold rushers. And then at that point, the Bitcoin community has three options. There's that I can imagine, and because there's Satoshi's coins, that there's like, not just Satoshi's coins, but like basically all the pay to public key coins. Is, I think, 1.8 million coins in that area. It's about 34,000 different pay to public key addresses out there with a balance, and they have an average of about 50 Bitcoin each. And so that's in a way, it's a good thing, because there's not like one big honeypot with all the lost coins, like, so like basically it's gonna there'll be like essentially a gold rush. And so the Bitcoin community has three options. They could either allow this liquidation to happen, dramatically increasing the supply of Bitcoin, circulating Bitcoin at least, or maybe it doesn't circulate. Maybe it's there's enough institutional stuff out there that people will just hold on to their Bitcoin and sell, borrow against it or something, right? There's also like the possibility that we might try to disable pay to public key spends, and that is potentially confiscatory, but also just like, it's in my opinion not an ideal solution. It's everything over 21 million, not like everything over 21 million minus a bunch of lost coins, like I'm not a fan of that. So there's a kind of a middle ground that I've actually gotten a suggestion from a fellow space member, where he was talking about this. He was like, well, why not just throttle, the spends? And so basically the idea is just to he was just with his drinking buddies, and they came up with this idea. I was like, actually, that's a really good idea. And so ultimately we call it the Hourglass proposal. And basically you keep it so that only one pay to public key address can be spent from in per block, basically per block. And so what that means is that if multiple quantum computers are working over the same key, and they both get it at the same time, then they're gonna like kind of bid each other up for trying to get that coin, and the last person who signs for it before the block gets mine gets the earnings from that. But like there'll be such a bidding up for that there might be some miners might be able to benefit from some of the upside from that as well. So that's one thing I kind of like about the Hourglass proposal, is that it's like it's a cool little compromise. And like BIP 360 is full of these, like, just technical compromises. Hourglass is a separate proposal from BIP 360, but just like the whole concept of like, say, what would I call a qubit soft fork, is qubit being with a capital B. It's kind of the brand I want to use for like selling this potential soft fork once it's ready. Is I just like I'm thinking BIP 360, maybe a 16x discount, but only for post-quantum cryptography. No funny business. It's funny. Even the Monkey JPEG people are like, I'm close to them, and they don't want an increase in the discount either, because that debases ordinals. And so like I was very careful in the design to like make it so that, okay, we want to increase the discount, but only for specific things. And then we have to like also have support for multi-sig and sig hashes. And it's just it's a bunch of complexity. And so I did my best to balance the various technical requirements, come with a balanced, if not like, it's not perfect, but it's not supposed to be perfect. It's supposed to be a compromise, and it balances a lot of just technical constraints, and something you never really even think about, like sig hash flags. And I'm trying to come up with like appropriate solutions for all these things, and it's just a complicated solution.
Yeah, can you dive more into the solution? Can we talk what BIP 360 is, and then one of the questions I have around the naming, because it's very clean 360, obviously, is that just because 359 was done and you were the next BIP up, or was that something that you were able to choose? And I ask because I just have no idea. Pure curiosity.
Yeah, no, there's definitely gaps in the numbers.
Okay.
They just chose like this brand new row, I guess, for me, because it is so different. But what was the other question?
Yeah, just if you could break down what the proposal is and what it's really trying to kind of safeguard or protect when it comes to the Bitcoin network. Because I know, and then here is probably a great point to also dive in where quantum would start to disrupt the Bitcoin network. I think a lot of it was that, it might be able to extract private keys just by knowing the public keys, which is obviously a
correct.
massive problem.
That's essentially how that works. Yeah.
Okay.
Like it's using an algorithm called Shor's algorithm that can factor large numbers, and the elliptic cryptography is essentially secured by something called the discrete log problem, which essentially boils down to the idea that it's very difficult to factor large numbers, and so if we remove that difficulty, then we're in trouble. The actual solution for BIP 360 is is to introduce three kinds of post-quantum cryptography to Bitcoin. So Bitcoin traditionally has just had one kind of cryptography. It uses one curve. It's called SecP 256K1. And then we're adding three more because we don't know which one is actually going to be like the one for us all to use. They have different trade-offs, verification speeds, sizes, and security assumptions. And so we've included three of them that are kind of distinct in their own ways, but they are FIP certified, or at least undergoing FIPS certification, which is the Federal Information Processing Standards. And so, like, I'm actually pretty bullish on those things because they're what the government uses to secure its own secrets. And so, like, if it's good enough for the government, then it's probably good enough for Bitcoin. Um, that's just my assumption, but that's also why we're including three of them, because, like, like, one could be broken, maybe two, but like three is a stretch. In addition to, we're not sunsetting post-quantum. I mean, we're not sunsetting elliptic curve cryptography. Like, so, like, basically you could still include a SecP 256K1 signature, Schnorr signature. Schnorr is like a more modern version of ECDSA, if you've heard of that. But yeah, you could include that, and then you'd have no reduction in security assumptions. It's just only adding, kind of like the equivalent of like adding additional locks to your address in your transaction. So, like, whenever you deposit funds into an address, you have to come up with, like, this address that you'll generate, your wallet will generate, will basically have pre-computed. It'll know in advance, like, how many signature items to use. You could have, like, all three of them, or all four of them, and then it's a very for very high value transactions, but later that it's going to be expensive to spend this. Whereas you could also use one of the smallest ones and just one of them, and one or two of them. Then that's not so bad in the cost perspective, but it's also maybe not the safest for a cold wallet, though that is a huge security improvement over just what we have now, especially if you're using something like Taproot. Taproot is particularly vulnerable to quantum attacks because it's basically a public key in the address itself. So whenever you send coins to a Taproot address, you're basically sending your coins to a public key, and you're revealing that public key, and quantum computers can then do whatever they want with it. There's also reused addresses that you want to avoid. So we've always, as Bitcoiners, a proper Bitcoiner knows, like, do not reuse your addresses. But they've been told this for privacy reasons. Turns out there's also a reason to not, like, do that as well from a quantum perspective, because whenever you spend your coins, you're actually revealing your public key. And also, those three scenarios, which are the pay to public key, the Taproot address, and the reuse addresses, those are what are vulnerable to long exposure attacks. But short exposure attacks, like, would be if you just sign your transaction and submitted it to the mempool. That's a different kind of scenario, in my opinion, because it really is like, it requires a different class of quantum computer in order to execute, like a much more powerful one. So, like, it's kind of like putting in a different bucket in terms of attacks, but it's definitely still worth thinking about and planning for, because eventually quantum computers could get there.
Yeah. When you say quantum computers can get there, can you break down where they are today and where they need to get to be able to, quote, get there, or to, break?
So, like, modern day quantum computers really suck. And so that's what it makes it really easy to, like, underestimate them. And like, Microsoft released a very interesting, like, kind of like development, but it wasn't quite clear how far along they were with this. And they're just saying, like, they made a lot of progress, a huge breakthrough, but they've been working on this for a long time, and we have no idea how much longer it will take for them to take topo conductors, or what they call topological qubits, or with Majorana fermion quasi particles. Like, if they crack that nut, very cool, because they've solved a fundamental problem of quantum computing, which is noise. another way to solve it is just through error correction codes and just like sheer quantity of qubits. So you can actually take a number of qubits, like maybe a 7x7 pattern, and turn them into a number of physical qubits, like a 7x7 pattern, into a single logical qubit. And so Google unveiled a chip that had like 105 physical qubits, and they're able to make like 2 logical qubits with it and entangle them with each other. And then there's the Majorana one Microsoft chip that had like 8 qubits, but it wasn't even quite clear if they were able to connect them using like what they call braided circuits. But regardless, like we're playing with like 2 and 8 maybe logical qubits, and it's just we're very early in that regard. IBM has made their own advancements, but their roadmap still goes out to like 2030, and so it really is like kind of early days in quantum computing. We're probably kind of like vacuum tubes instead of transistors, and so yeah, it's that's kind of where we're at. Is like I'm not too worried right now. Just like but where they could get the real danger zone is when they get to about 1,500 logical qubits, like error corrected qubits or noise isolated qubits, because then you can start running Shor's algorithm, and that's actually not a lot. Like for most of their more interesting applications of quantum computers, like fusion simulation or like development of enzymes that could break down forever chemicals, or just things like that, like modeling pharmaceuticals, then those require millions of qubits. And so kind of like the first stop before like all the really cool advancements they want to make with quantum computers is, before they get there, they can run Shor's algorithm, which is kind of more trivial, like almost Hello World style, like maybe not Hello World, but it's like the first non-trivial program you can run on a quantum computer that demonstrates quantum advantage.
You had mentioned, and I want to make sure I get this reference. Yeah, you had mentioned the imitation game. And one of the things that I think about this is like, let's live in the world where you and I now have the quantum computer to go and break, or to take public keys and from that extract private keys to basically, start to really disrupt. If we go wallet by wallet, we do one wallet a week, and we only go for dormant wallets that, as you said, either it's Taproot or, and I'm forgetting the actual acronym. Is it P2PK? Is that it?
Yeah.
Right. We would have to have some type of a strategy, because at some point, if you could crack all cracking Bitcoin, being able to extract a private key from a public key would irreversibly change the way people think about the value of the network. Because right now it's, I want to say, not corruptible from like a brute force attack or some kind of a quantum attack. So, just like Warren Buffett said, if I could buy all the Bitcoins, I wouldn't. And that makes sense. If you have all the diamonds in the world, it's probably not worth any value on some level. So if you had all the Bitcoins in the world, it's probably not worth any value on some level. So when I think about Q Day, going back to that, I think about the imitation game, and I totally think like, yeah, you and I would sit we'd sit in that basement with your demonic poster, and we would look and we would say, all right, which are the ones we want to crack? And we want to crack these because maybe people won't realize for a little bit of time. Maybe no one's going to look. Maybe it's just a little bit of Bitcoin. Maybe it's only, hey, there's 0.25 Bitcoin, but Bitcoin's worth a lot of money. What does that sound like? You're shaking your head. Am I onto something or no?
Oh yeah, I mean, like, it's interesting to go through these thought experiments. One thing that I'll know though is that early on, quantum computers are going to be like millions of dollars, and they're going to be non-trivial to operate. Like, you can't just like put one in your basement. It's not going to work. Like you need a bunch of infrastructure around it. You need not only do you need a source of liquid nitrogen, but you also need liquid helium, and like they use like 2 different kinds of coolants, and they get super cold. Like they need to be chilled to near absolute zero, and so it's It's high tech stuff, really high tech stuff that's not available to many people. And so that that also kind of like puts a limit on, like, they're not going to go after a quarter Bitcoin wallet, like with all that tech,
For
And
sure.
then also another reason not going to go after a quarter Bitcoin is that um, all those 50 Bitcoin outputs, right? Like you'll probably go after just one or two of those, and like we see those move occasionally, like it makes the news. Actually, it's so rare these days, but
Sure.
it does happen. And so yeah, there's it's interesting, like just thought experiment to go through, like what could that look like, how would that work, but ultimately, ideally, we get ahead of this problem and we uh, activate BIP 360 or something like it, and we give people plenty of time to transition and their funds to the new address types, because like it is a completely optional soft fork. It's not like we're adding something to people's existing addresses. Like people will need to migrate, and they'll need to decide in advance, how secure do they want their coins. Like that's also like um, a consideration, especially for how like you'll maybe your wallet might make a suggestion based on the size of the stack, the size of UTXO, or the balance of the address. But no, it really like it really is like like something that's difficult to imagine, but because there's so many dimensions to it, but it's also kind of interesting to think about. Yeah.
Yeah, the way you talk about a quantum computer, it sounds like when computers were first kind of introduced to the world in the 60s and they took up warehouses and there was only
Yep.
5 megabytes or something. Now that's like,
Yeah.
I have a terabyte in my phone or something at some point, so it does sound like there's going to be. This conversation has been good. Let me say that, because I think it's allowed me to see, okay, we're at somewhere between 2 to 10 logical qubits. You're saying we need 1,500. On top of that, very few people on the planet are going to be able to like use this. Are they going to point it at Bitcoin? They may not even see Bitcoin as like worthwhile. And then even if they do, then, you have the BIP 360. One of the things I most wanted to ask you, because I've heard you now talk on multiple different channels, and who do you talk to? Who are you able to talk to about this? Because as a Bitcoiner, first and foremost, as well as I know, and most people listening to this, it's freaking lonely. Pardon my Spanish. There's only a certain amount of people that I can talk to about Bitcoin, probably 5 to 10. And there's actually more people I can talk to about Bitcoin, obviously, because I work for Compass, right? But like, then there's the amount of people who are going to enjoy talking to me and maybe about Bitcoin. And then, it just feels really small all the time. I tweeted
Yeah.
this the other day and I was like, getting into technology early is one of the loneliest and most exciting things you can do. And so for you, who do you talk to about this besides yourself 23 hours a day?
Okay, so there's like basically 5 people that I
Okay.
can really depend on for their input. 2 on the Bitcoin side, 3 on the like more quantum computing side, but like they're also kind of more involved in Bitcoin also. There's some overlap because like a lot of quantum researchers just don't give a heck, but it's like some people are more aware. So on the Bitcoin side, you might have heard of them, Merch and John Atack. John Atack is a cryptographer for Blockstream, and Merch and Dreamus. He's just a well-known like developer and contributor to Bitcoin Optech and things like that, and Bitcoin Stack Exchange. Really knowledgeable guy. Have really helped guide the bit. Then there's also a professor in Calgary, somewhere in Alberta. His name is Pierre Luc. He understands the problem very well. He also has built post-quantum cryptography for Ethereum, and we consult it with each other all the time. He's a great guy. There's also a guy who's studying quantum computing as a student at Arizona State University. His name is Tippy. He's actually been really useful. He actually goes by Tippy Comanche. He's a pretty cool guy. And then finally, and actually, Tippy contributed some like a version of Shor's algorithm that works over 8-bit numbers, and we used that to kind of get a sense for like how long it takes for these things to work. And we decided it took maybe about 3 minutes to factor an 8-bit number. If that gives you like an idea of like how long some of these might take, and that's just like where they are now. And so, and of course, 8 bits is a far cry from 256 bits, but the fact that they can do it is kind of like, oh, it's one thing. And then also there's a guy named Ian who has been like very, very useful in terms of just explaining to me the different algorithms out there, and like just providing some perspective on some of the design choices I made. So yeah, it's like maybe like 5 people that I talk to regularly on this. Forgive me if I've left anybody out. I do have an acknowledgement section in the pay to quantum resistant hash, which is the BIP 360 proposal. So I try to keep that updated. But yeah, essentially those are kind of like my the people who I found to be most like the biggest contributors so far.
And just kind of as we wrap up this conversation, and I'm sure that if you're open to it, we'll continue this conversation, because I'm sure every, 6 months, maybe less, this will evolve rapidly. I'm assuming by the time Vegas happens and maybe we meet IRL, things will have changed, or something new will 1% change. What is something I can do? I'm a non-technical Bitcoiner. I'm a Bitcoin miner in many ways. And what is something I can do? You have a pleb listening who's got 3 S19J Pros in his garage, and he hears this and he's like, man, Bitcoin is a huge part of the way my family is going to continue to achieve some semblance of financial security in this uncertain world. What are things that they can do? What is something I can do? You probably get this question a lot because it seems kind of overwhelming. Quantum, right? Quantum computing, cracking Bitcoin. What do you say?
I would recommend going to BIP360.org, which is like kind of like a more user-friendly version of the BIP, and just like reading through the parts you kind of get, and like the first couple sections are kind of written more for plebs to understand and get a sense for the problem, and then it does get a bit more technical further down you go, but just skip over the parts that are too technical and then just like, just kind of skim it and get a sense for what it's all about. And then maybe you can signal your support on social media. There's a nonprofit that I founded called Surmount Systems, which you can find at surmount.systems or Surmount Systems on X. We actually don't use Nostr for a specific reason, which is that all Nostr identities are public keys. And so, it's regardless. We do accept Bolt 12 and silent payment donations. The reason behind that is just that we don't want to reuse addresses, and so those are good ways to not have address reuse. Though in the longer term of things, Lightning might actually be really vulnerable to quantum computing, but fortunately that hasn't been the case yet. Those are kind of the ways that they could really help to signal your support on X or Master. To say like BIP 360 is pretty great. Share this podcast. I think this was a pretty good one. You asked really great questions here. So that's basically my suggestions.
I love that, and I love that pushing people to share the episode. I think the more people that can kind of hear this and understand this and just kind of have it in their back pocket, it will probably be the gap between when I heard about Bitcoin in 2014 and then when I finally bought Bitcoin in an ATM in 2017. People will hear this in 2025, and then 2027, it will be like, oh, quantum. And they're like, oh, I did hear BIP 360 because I heard Hunter. He was on this podcast, and that was, okay, that, it's like somewhere back in their memory. I'll go ahead in the episode show notes, and I'm going to leave the nonprofit you just called out, Sermon Systems, and I will leave their account also on X. I'm going to put up your account, which is just at Crypto Quick, but I'll make sure I put that down there. And then, I'm excited for more people to hear about this. I'll also put BIP360.org so people can go check that out. And like you said, go through where you get maybe uncomfortable, maybe lean in a little bit into that uncomfortability of some of the technical parts. But I think that sounds like a great resource for people to have. If you're watching this on YouTube, please subscribe. Listening to this on a podcast platform, please subscribe and make sure you're following us on X, LinkedIn, and YouTube at Compass Mining. Hunter, next time I'm out in Denver, I'll definitely be at the space. So hopefully I get to see you there.
Awesome. Thank you very much.